Before I start, we will be live on Dream 11, the new home of sports streaming. If you haven't downloaded it, what are you waiting for? The link is in the description. We are live this week. Wednesday night, it's PSG versus Liverpool in the Champions League. And we're doing 2 games on Sunday. It's Palace versus Newcastle. Massive game for me. And then it's followed up by Chelsea versus Man City. And I'll have a couple of the Chelsea boys on for that one to just watch them sweat. It's going to be a brutal weekend of football, but catch us live on Dream 11. This is the message to the Newcastle United owners. I'm going to try and be as sincere as possible. I'm trying not to rant in this video because I'm worried about Newcastle in the direction that this club is about to go in over the next 10 years if we don't make big changes this summer. I think the reality is we've been making some serious mistakes consecutively, season after season, and we've been getting away with it, and we're not going to get away with it much longer, as this season has proven. And with this summer coming up, we're not going to have European football next season. Very unlikely at this point. We're going to lose the Anthony Gordons, the Tonalis, the Livramentos. That's likely to happen now. It could even be worse than that potentially. And there's also a major rebuild due at other parts of the squad as well. There's a massive situation upon us this summer, and I just really want to appeal to the Newcastle owners to just hear me out here, because some of the decisions that you've been making are really wrong, and it's fine. You've never owned a football club. First time, it's not gone too bad, to be fair, but you need to hear some of this shit, because if you trust Eddie Howe to do this rebuild, you will be right back here in the same place we are now in another 5 years or 10 years or however long. It's going to keep happening, and I'm going to explain why. Now, Eddie Howe has all of the power, or has had all the power in Newcastle pretty much from the get-go. They brought in 2 different directors of football who didn't get on with Eddie Howe because of the power struggle. It's quite obvious. Dan Ashworth, obviously, who ended up at Man United, he felt sidelined because Eddie would bypass him and go to the powers that be to make sure he got his own way. So he really rendered Dan Ashworth useless. No wonder he wanted to leave, to be fair to him. And then there was Paul Mitchell, who openly criticised Eddie Howe's recruitment strategy. He said publicly it was not fit for purpose. Now, to be fair to Mitchell, he did have a good track record of bringing in good players for not a lot of money. At Southampton, he brought in Mane for 10 million, Tadic, Wanyama, Pele. At Tottenham, he brought in Heung-min Son, Trippier, Alderweireld, Dele Alli. He brought up the fact that we were spending a lot of money. We weren't selling enough, except when we were forced to because of the PSR had a gun to our head. And we were overly reliant on premium prices at premium aged players. We weren't being shrewd in the market. We weren't, finding little gems for a few million here and there. That wasn't happening. And he basically said, you don't have a data-driven global approach here. It is very narrow in your approach. So he wanted to go for a cheaper approach to avoid the PSR situation and a more sustainable long-term model so that you're not panic buying and overpaying for players, etc., etc. I think it's hilarious, by the way, that he said all that a year before all of these chickens came home to roost. What he is describing is a model similar to the likes of Brentford or Brighton, but maybe with a better budget so that we can maybe bomb them out the water when, instead of being the ones bombed out the water because we're trying to sit at the big boy table with Man United and Chelsea, which obviously happened in the summer. Now, ironically, that mirrors a lot of what David Hopkinson, the new Newcastle United CEO, has kind of been saying, more of a trading approach, a buy well, sell well strategy. So is Eddie Howe really the man to be doing that? Well, I think if we look at when he first came in, obviously a bit of a quick fix needed because he was taking over from a team battling relegation. He brought in Trippier and Dan Burn for a combined 25 million. Chris Wood was 25 million. Matt Targett was a couple of million. And then he brought in Bruno Guimaraes as well around that time, which was more of a long-term play. I think the total fee ended up being about 41 million. Now, since then, in going on from the Bruno Guimaraes signing, and you look at the long-term approach Eddie Howe has taken and the amount of money he's spending on each player, Isak, 66 million, Tonali, 55, Anthony Gordon, 45, Lewis Hall, 35, Livramento, 40, Voltemora, 69, Elanga, 55, Wissa, 55, Ramsey, 43, Harvey Barnes, 39, Malik Chow, 40, Bruno Guimaraes, 41.65. For those 12 players, Eddie Howe has spent roughly £585 million. That works out at about £49 million a player. Do we think that's sustainable for Newcastle United in the situation we're in with PSR regulations and all that? Do we think that's the right approach to be taken? Well, when you consider that we're currently below a whole bunch of clubs who are spending less than half of that per player, I think that gives you the answer. And look, some of those were good players. I'm not saying they weren't. We can get into that. But just the sheer volume of money we're spending per player is insane, especially when out of those 12 players that we've signed for all of that money, only one of them has been sold. And the problem with spending that much money is that when it comes off, it's great. Yeah, you're going to make a bit more money on them when you do eventually sell them. But when it doesn't come off, it hits the club like a hammer. Look at Wissa now, for example. £55 million we spent on a 29-year-old. One of the worst signings in Premier League history when you consider everything. He cannot get a game, and we're looking at potentially having to now loan him out in the summer. I mean, what a nightmare. And Newcastle are not Manchester United. We're not Chelsea. We're not Liverpool. We can't afford to do stuff like that. Now, every season, Eddie complains about we can't afford this and PSR that and, oh, it's been so hard in the transfer window. Every single year we hear that from him. But when you're spending £50 million nearly a player on 12 players, is the problem not you, mate? Because in shopping for players at that price, you're not leaving yourself with enough money to look after the rest of the squad. You buy half the positions that you actually need. You end up letting players who aren't at the level stay on the side for too long, aging out of their contracts. And because you haven't replaced them and players get injured, they end up playing a lot more games than what you'd intended for. And guess what happens? They end up letting you down consistently and you end up fucked in the league. When if you're taking that 50 million and spend 30 of it on one player and 20 of it on the other, you'd have two decent players there instead of one good one who's injured and one player who's fucking terrible who's playing week in, week out. It's not rocket science. And when you don't recycle the squad, these players run down their contracts, you haven't replaced them, they age out, and then you've got a whole bunch of players to sign in the summer. So when you thought you were being clever, oh, well, they'll do for now and we'll just buy these superstars, you end up with fucking a whole bunch of players to sign, and then guess what? You haven't got enough money to do that either because you've been spending so much on what you've got. And it reminds me of the Mark Gahey story that Paul Mitchell was trying to sign him for Eddie Howe, and there was a lot of discussion about how much money are we going to pay for Mark Gahey. Eddie Howe bid £65 million for Mark Gahey. 65 million quid. We have a whole defence that needs replenished. You know, we could have had two £30 million defenders and a £5 million young prospect, for example. But Eddie Howe's like that woman who buys a posh handbag but can't afford to pay her fucking rent. He's not looking at the bigger picture. He clearly isn't, because look at the squad right now coming into this summer. You look at some of the players that he's allowed to leave for peanuts or on a free. Callum Wilson, we could have got shot of him a couple of years ago, could have got good money for him, and instead left on a free. Jamal Lascelles, the same. Between those two, you could have had 20 or 30 million combined if you'd sold them a couple of years ago, but no, we get nothing. This is not how you run a football club. We got 5 million for Almiron, but if we'd have sold him when he was on form, because he was clearly not going to keep that up, we would have got maybe 15 million, maybe 20 million at one point. What about a Saudi deal? It's not sensible. And Eddie's mismanagement of the squad is really going to be exposed this summer. Ramsdale's loan ends this summer, so he's going. You've got Nick Pope, who's got 1 year left. He's 33. He's absolutely finished. Fabian Shaw's 34, horrendous injury, and his legs went a year ago. He's out of contract this summer, and yet he's been playing first team football. Dan Burn, he's going off a cliff. I'm sorry, love him, absolutely love him, but his form has been shocking this season, and he's got 1 year left as well. He's 33 years old. Kieran Trippier, he goes for free this summer as well. All players who are playing regular first team football, I'm listing here. Emil Kraft, he's going on a free this summer as well. He's another one who gets a game when he's fit. Not first teamer, but it's amazing how many games he does get. Just shocking management of the squad. Just disgraceful. And all of this could have been managed if Eddie had have just been more realistic with his money. That's 2 keepers and 4 defenders who regularly play for us. All as good as gone in the next year. It's just absolutely shocking. You can't get any money for them because they're all down to the last year of the contract or they're going on a free. It's I'm not going to get annoyed. It's terrible. And it shows a complete lack of thought, a lack of accountability, a lack of responsibility taken from Eddie to manage the entire squad. And no one talks about the fact that he spends money this way. Because yes, some of those signings have come off, but you're not being responsible and you're not thinking about the bigger picture. Here's an example. Jacob Murphy, 31 years old, got a pay increase on his contract, but they didn't extend the length of the contract. So his contract is up in a year and he signed a pay increase, but we don't get an extra year on his deal, so that if someone came in for him, we'd end up getting some money out of him because there's 2 years left on his deal. He's down to 1 year still. Who fucking thought that was a good idea? Joe Willock, 26 years old, 1 year left on his deal. Should have been sold 2 years ago. Unbelievable. Is anyone across this? Is anyone like... Because I'm a fan and I'm checking this shit. So are the people who are getting paid to do it, what are they doing? Because this is Eddie Howe's responsibility. Do you think, he gets absolved the responsibility because he's not the director of football? He's seen two of them off, man. He didn't get on with them. He took the reins. He took total control. He's quite capable, since everyone praises how much Eddie never sleeps and he works so much, of checking how much the length of the contracts are on the players he's still got left at the club. I'm sure he's capable of that. Are we going to absolve him of responsibility of that the way we do tactics as well, are we? This man spent 55 million on a 29-year-old Wissa. He's averaging almost 50 million pound a player. He is neglecting the overall health of the squad. We've now got 9 players whose contracts are up either now or in the next 12 months. I'm not even including Bruno. Bruno Guimaraes, our number 1 player, has only got 2 years left on his deal. And with a hot prospect like him that many clubs would want to sign, that's criminal as well. You're leaving yourself in a vulnerable position whereby, really, if he forces a move, you've got to give in, because if you let him go 1 year down the road, then you're really not going to get any money for him. Between Bruno and all those players I mentioned, that's 9 players who are close to the end of their contract or already at the end. Players who play regularly for Newcastle United, not fringe players who are not going to miss, not going to notice. Big players, and that's not including Tonali, Gordon, Livramento, who we expect the people to come in for this summer. And you think back to what I said earlier about Eddie Howe spending 55 million on Wissa, 29 years old, averaging almost 50 million pound a player, and then leaving all of this to creep up on him in one summer. He's given himself a giant amount of players he needs to now sign this summer, in neglecting the squad, thinking, I'll worry about that later. And now you really do have money worries, because you can't spend 50 million pound a player on 9 players, can you, what you've been averaging? So now you've got to shop at the bargain bin. Now you're going to pay the price. Whereas if you'd been shopping at the reasonably priced aisle for the entirety and maybe occasionally pick a little star out, you wouldn't have to have such a massive drop off in the players you're going to bring in. If you'd have been looking, as Paul Mitchell suggested, in some of those hidden gems, across Europe, where, like Brentford, like all of these clubs do, you wouldn't be in the situation you're finding yourself in now. It is diabolical squad management, this. And the imbalance in this squad, from some of the stronger areas we've got, and these players who might leave, to the players who nobody wants and there's no time left on their contract anyway, it's criminal. And that's before I even get into the profiling issues we've seen from Eddie spending in the last 12 months. When you get top 5 and you get that Champions League football, teams start giving you more respect, right? It's not like when Eddie had his first season in charge, his first full season, where teams were not respecting us. We were able to press high and get in behind them and catch them off guard. The kind of football we're going to play needs to change. It needs to evolve. And in signing an Alanga, who previously had played for a Nottingham Forest side who were used to not being respected and capitalised on it in their own way, he was able to get in behind, and he's not the best footballer, but he's a hell of an athlete. That profile never suited for what our goals were at this point in Eddie's managerial situation at Newcastle. He needed players who were going to be better on the ball at breaking teams down when they're defending and giving you that respect. That was never thought about. Similarly, Nick Voltemora, £70 million player. You were criticised by Paul Mitchell for not scouting players properly. I mean, if there's ever evidence of it, it's in this transfer. This is the most money Newcastle United have ever spent on a signing. And it is as though Eddie Howe did no research whatsoever on him. Because Eddie Howe has one style of striker that he wants us to play with, and that is a pacey striker, high press, doesn't really care about much else. It's all about defending from the front, making it uncomfortable. It's not about us being on the ball. It never is with Eddie. That's across the field. Even in midfield, there is no plan with the ball. It's about what we do off the ball. He went for Sesko, who was a lot more of a like-for-like with Alexander Isak. When we didn't get Sesko, instead of pivoting to the next guy who was in that mould, and don't tell me there isn't, there are plenty of profiles out there who would fit that mould, he went for someone completely different. Voltemora is a footballing striker, and because he didn't fit what Eddie Howe wanted him to do, Eddie relegated him into the midfield and gave up on him. A £70 million asset. One who was rated as one of the most exciting prospects in all of Europe. Germany under 21, top goal scorer for them in the under 21s, now taken over as the main number 9. Scored a bunch of goals in Germany, and we have smashed his value to pieces. All because he can't do what Eddie Howe wants him to do. But if you'd done your research, you would have known that that's not what he is. Again, criminal from Eddie Howe. A criminal mismanagement of the squad and a criminal use of Newcastle United's money. The owner's money. If you're watching, I fucking hope you are. Even 40 million for Jacob Ramsey, like realistically, are you saying we couldn't have found a player as good as that across Europe who, yeah, you might not have Premier League proven experience, but that premium that we're paying for that, we can't afford to keep doing that. We need to invest in the whole squad. You look at what Brentford are doing, you look at what Brighton are doing. It is madness that we pay that much money for a player like Jacob Ramsey, who is okay. There is so much value out there, and we're not even just having a look. It's unbelievable. And if anyone thinks that this strategy is going to get Newcastle United competing with the big boys, we haven't got a hope, because we can't punch with them. That's proven. So we've got to be smarter than them if we can be. And letting your squad go to wreck and ruin because you're blowing your money on big names who may or may not come good. Some of them have, some of them haven't. It's absolute insanity. And I think back to the Paul Mitchell quote where he said it wasn't fit for purpose, talking about how we're exceeding PSR, we're overly reliant on peak age domestic players at premium prices. You know, those Premier League proven players, Alanga, Wissa, Ramsey, just spending 150 million on 3 players like that. He said we had an insufficient global data-driven network. Like, even the Voltemada situation, how could you have signed him and not known he's not the kind of player that you want him to be? How could you sign off on £70 million and within a matter of months, instead of you adapting to him because you knew what you were getting, you're saying you're not doing what I want you to do, you're in the fucking midfield, son. It is unbelievable. I'm not saying Eddie hasn't signed some good players, but let's be real. If you spend 585 million and none of them are good players, you'd have to be pretty terrible. Like, give him credit, yeah, but it's not like he didn't spend premium prices on these guys. That's the thing that I never hear enough of when I'm watching Newcastle podcasts or hearing people talk about it. No one ever acknowledges Eddie spent at the big boy table a lot of the time. This wasn't shrewd business. Don't get me wrong. Occasionally, maybe we got in there before a player had quite got to the level that a Man United or a Chelsea or whoever was going to get him. We got there first, and that was the shrewd bit. And I don't want to take away from Eddie did do well in highlighting some of those players. But the point is that strategy should have been reserved for a handful at maximum, because it's ruined the entire squad now. And now this summer, it's a mess. It's a fucking mess. And not only has that mess led us into falling down the league table because the imbalance in the squad means that there's terrible performers in there week in, week out. It now means that the good players we did sign want to leave because we haven't got back into Champions League. And in spending almost £50 million per player on those 12 players, Eddie has somehow managed to be below Sunderland, Everton, Fulham, Brighton, Brentford in the league, losing back-to-back games against Brentford, losing back-to-back games against Sunderland. We've lost more games than Leeds and Sunderland, who just came into the Premier League, because they're being smart with their money. Sunderland's whole squad was cobbled together for what we spent on like 2 players, man. That shows how possible it is to go out there, get a lot of numbers in, and keep you want the floor of your squad to be at a good level as well as the ceiling. Eddie's too busy looking at the ceiling. He hasn't thought about the floor nearly enough, and it's cost us big time. And now we need a whole fucking renovation of the floor. We need a whole new fucking foundation put into the fucking house, because it's fucking crumbling in on one now. Because anyone can go for a big money choice every single time and get it right more often than not. But you actually have to be a lot smarter than that when you're in the position that Newcastle are in, which is not the big 6. It's going to take time for us to get there. And in order to do that, we need a few things. We need a manager who can spot a player's decline before it's too late, so that you can move them on before that, everyone else is aware of it. That's a very crucial thing. Everyone highlights what Eddie's done in signing some of the good players he signed. No one ever talks about the players he's moved on, because he's made a fucking mess of it. Has he brought in youth players? Has he shit? Yeah, he signed a couple. Lewis Miley's the only one he's brought through. He doesn't give any kids a chance. His style is completely incapable of being played two games a week. We've found that out. That is proven now. That is not even up for debate. And that's another thing where if the owners don't get rid of him and they give him all this money to make all these same mistakes again, next season, we might get back into the top European places. What happens then? 2 games a week and it all goes to shit. There's just so many reasons now, the more I look into this, where it's like, it would be criminal to let Eddie continue at the end of the season, no matter how good things have been at times under him. That's before I even talk about the physical style of football he's used has been totally figured out, and that there are no attacking patterns of play that are repeatable whatsoever in this Newcastle side. It's like we do nothing on the training ground. And people always say, well, if not Eddie Howe, then who? It's like, well, it's very hard to say that anyone is a guarantee, but there's things that Eddie doesn't do that we desperately need in a new manager. one who can play 2 games a week and who's proven that they can handle, they can balance European competition, because that's where we want to be. And Eddie's proven he can't do that now. Eddie has also proven that he cannot recycle the squad and keep refreshing it as he goes. He's made an absolute mess of that. So we need someone who can trade as the new ownership, the new CEO wants us to trade, and someone who has proven that they can find the odd cheap gem, and it doesn't always have to be huge money every time. Because I see people comparing Eddie Howe to Areola at Bournemouth, for example, and other clubs around him, and they say, well, yeah, but Eddie's done better than them. It's like, yeah, but he's spent 600 million more than them, or whatever the fuck it is. Like, these guys are really playing strict, at the table here. Even Unai Emery at Aston Villa spent a fraction of what Eddie Howe has spent, So we need managers who are far more capable of doing it the hard way, because it is going to be hard. And then if they do get extra money, then great. That's a bonus. Anyway, look, that's been on my mind. I hope that makes sense to people. I really think that it's been overlooked, and as it always is, by the media, because people really don't look into Newcastle in depth. It's all about, you should just be grateful that a manager like Eddie Howe would choose you lot. But yeah, his last job, he got relegated. So he was lucky to get the job, and I think we've more than compensated him, and we've more than backed him, and he's put us in a position that he's put us in now, and I think there should be consequences. Because I heard someone the other day saying that Eddie would be the next Liverpool manager, and I just thought to myself, are you on crack? Do you imagine people making excuses for Arne Slot right now when his season's going to shit, and people going, well, it's 2 games a week? Imagine him coming out with that, the Liverpool fans. Imagine him even saying that, the way Eddie Howe said, well, I've just not got the time on the training ground, 2 games a week, 2 games a week. Imagine that flying at a proper club. Fuck off. The shit we listen to. I tried not to get annoyed, but the way the narrative changes for Newcastle fans is though we should just be happy with whatever we fucking get in life. I'm done. I'm fucking done listening to that crap, mate. Anyway, let us know what you think in the comments below. I'll be interested to see if anyone thinks I'm wrong, or if you maybe didn't realise just how bad he let the squad go to wreck and ruin. Let us know. Hit the like button, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.